Hi, Shambhu. Thank you for meeting me.
Aloha, greetings from the Hawaiian island of Kauai, um, and oceans of aloha from Mother Kauai.
That was the beautiful place of the ancient Atlantis. So
Well, that's a whole different conversation,
it
right? Is
is
it
where we're not going.
was there something before Atlantis or Lemuria? But here's what I know about Kauai, Esther. We moved here about 6 years ago, and soon after, just being on the beach, just being in nature here draws you inside. And during one meditation, the land started talking to me without language, just that feeling of inner knowing. And the island told me that she spoke her name to people when people came here first. The name Kauai was not given to Kauai by people. It wasn't made up by people. It was given to people by her. And what's very interesting is that in my tradition, which is non-dual Shaivism, which of course includes Shakta energy practices. So I think the proper name should be non-dual Shaivism and Shaktism.
Shakti, yes.
Yes. There's one mantra, and I like my practices that I teach are heart-centric. It's based on the heart as the foundation for liberation and expansion of consciousness from individuality into universality. One of the practices to enter the heart and abide in the heart is working with a mantra. But the way you do it is so when you pronounce a consonant, even the consonant has a little bit of sense of a vowel after it. K. So what you do is with your awareness, you pronounce k, but you try to cut off the vowel, right? So it's like, right, just to like that expression, right? Just to like bring you inside, right? To bring the mind, the senses inside the heart, right? So k or ka, kha, basically refers to also space, akasha,
Exactly.
in Sanskrit, right? So you use the k to bring into the space of the heart, ka, right? And then the first three letters of the Sanskrit alphabet are I, E, U. And it's understood in the tradition that all the other letters, all the other vowels and consonants, which is one way to represent the diversity of Shaktis, of energies creating this beautiful universe and this beautiful planet, arise from these vowels A, E, U. And there you have it, Kawaii, right? So Kawaii is the basis of creation anchored in the heart K, right? Kawaii. So Kawaii itself is a mantra. The name Kawaii is a mantra. So you can work with Kawaii, especially when you visit Kauai or the people like me who are lucky enough and blessed enough to be here, with the name Kauai as a mantra to bring you into that heart, to penetrate through the diversities, the Shaktis and energies into what's called universal emission, which brings you back into the pure powers, unmanifested powers, where we can realize our true nature.
Yes. I mean, I've listened to some of your presentations, and it has been on my radar as well to look at the sacred origin of language and sounds itself, and there is a universal transmission in every sound. And what I'm trying to look at is how each language actually has been um, dropping in frequency, meaning that we left out strategically sounds, vowels, endings. For example, my mother tongue is Hungarian. And just like the Slavic language, Serbian or Bulgarian, they are ancient languages. Obviously, Hungarian is not in the same group, but when we look at a word itself, just like you gave the example of duch, Yes, in Hungarian, it's the same thing. It is referring to Dach and Duch, which is the same thing, that the respirare in Latin. And these very ancient sounds are transmitted through mantra. So I would like to ask you, because your tradition uses a lot of mantra, did you use that as a vehicle of your awakening?
Yes. And we can touch about it later, but as part of my personal spiritual unfoldment, the goddess informed me here in Kauai, I had to go to Kauai on the other side of the world, being born and raised in Bulgaria. The goddess here in Kauai told me to start going back to Bulgaria because that's where it all started. And that was the message I got 2 years ago. And what's happened since then, it just absolutely blows my mind. The things I discovered about Bulgaria. And one of the things, and meeting the right people along the way. And one of the things along the way was truly re-embracing, if you will, my own native language, i.e. Bulgarian. So, and meeting the right people along the way to help me with that understanding. And nothing happens by coincidence, but I met this Bulgarian guy, older Bulgarian gentleman in his late 60s last summer on one of the sacred sites in Bulgaria. And then he introduced me to his two friends. So I ended up spending a week visiting truly incredible sacred sites in Bulgaria with three amazing Bulgarian guys in their late 60s, early 70s. One of them was #2 in math in the world when he was younger. They're all linguists. They're all spiritualists. They read the Bhagavad Gita, the Greek myths, the Bulgarian legends. They read everything. And they're just so smart. I mean, they're just another level from everybody else I have met. And they introduced me to this idea of really meditating on and rediscovering the words itself in the language. And the idea that you know that the language is ancient when you take a word, an important word or any word, and you can break it down in its constituent parts, and you get a deeper layer of meanings. And
It's like a
sometimes,
satsang, isn't it? Like one word can be like a truth transmission right away.
yes. So let me illustrate with an example, right? So, and in the process, I discovered the amazing similarities between Bulgarian and Sanskrit. And then, of course, mainstream science and linguists would tell you that Sanskrit would be the origin of those languages, right? That would be the proto language.
Yes.
But, well, that might not be the truth, right? We might get into it. Because the DNA studies that show you where the original father was, right? And how people spread out between Europe, Asia, and Africa, right? So, but that's a whole different conversation. So let me give an example. In Bulgarian, the word for freedom is svoboda. Svo comes from the root svoya, meaning you own. And in Sanskrit, it's the same, sva. Actually, in Tantra Loka, which is you can think of Tantra Loka, which means the light on and off of the Tantras, is the Bible of non-dual Shaivite and Shakta practices. Yes. Sva is the most frequently used word.
Like Svadharma, there's so many. Yes. But Sva also means every, all, totality, no?
Well, that's Sarva, right? So it's kind of like a derivation.
In Serbian, it does, like Svemir.
Yes, yes, that's true. So then the second part of Svoboda, freedom, is Buddha. Buddha means aware, means awake.
Awake.
In Bulgarian. Same thing. Buddha means awake in Sanskrit, right? So it's exactly the same thing. But basically svoboda in Bulgarian. And in everyday usage, you can just say svoboda, but you never stop and think about it. What does it mean? You just take it for granted. It's a little bit unconscious, right? You grew up, you were told this word, and you were told what it means, but you don't really internalize it. You don't really, if you will, meditate with it. So that's my encouragement. If the listeners of this podcast, this videocast, take one lesson, become more aware of the language itself, and meditate on the language. Get interested in the roots, the etymology of the language. In this particular case, svoboda, our ancestors told us, left us with an incredible legacy, ensuring we don't lose that teaching in the word itself, that freedom literally means your own awakeness. Your own awakeness is freedom, is your freedom, everybody's freedom. How profound. And just that becomes a meditation and draws you in.
Exactly.
Right.
Because I've always told me, as soon as you said this, an end of teaching.
Yeah, and we can start the podcast. That's it, and just play this, and we're done.
And drop into the self. Exactly.
Yes, you drop in the self. The other one that blows me truly away and completely deconstructs everything.
Yes.
Just annihilates the mind. The word for consciousness in Bulgarian is saznание. And this one has two layers of meaning. Sas, znание, literally, I mean, I could even say this in everyday language. Saznание means with knowledge.
With knowledge.
So consciousness means with knowledge. And then the natural question is, what knowledge? What are we talking about? Okay, just the brilliance of the ancients. Сознание. Then you break it down another level. С, us, which means with me. На, ние. To us. So that knowledge is the expansion of awareness, of consciousness, from the sense of me to the sense of us.
And that is the two levels which you haven't mentioned in the video, which I'm getting now, is that is the connection of the higher heart, which is from the individuated to the collective. So that's the heart, and this immense knowledge of the higher mind. It is so beautiful, these two beautiful layers of embodiment, actually, because I don't see too many people out there who have actually harmonized these two domains. I see even myself, I was much more in the higher mind. Obviously, you needed the higher heart to such a degree to open the higher mind. And there's always kind of a lag and a teeter-tatter going on. And I think I pray for the harmonization within us of the higher mind and the higher heart. And that is what I'm interested in.
That's a whole different angle, right, that we can get into. But just to finish, to continue this thread a little bit more about language and the sacredness of language, right? Just that contemplating with ourselves, okay, my ancestors told me that consciousness means to have knowledge, to be with knowledge. We're not talking about going to university and getting a degree.
Yeah.
In whatever subject you want, right? That we're talking about a completely different ballgame here, right? So what is that knowledge? That's that universal knowledge that consciousness is the key. And consciousness means with knowledge, and that knowledge is the expansion of identity from I to us, right? And it's very interesting, Esther, that that's not a discovery, if you will, not discovery, but remembering, recollecting. The old Bulgarians, and we're talking about way before Christianity,
Way before, yes.
way before Buddha, and Orpheus is a whole different conversation. The old Bulgarians had a monotheistic religion.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, the name of their god, wait for it, is Tangra. So, yes, Tantra, right?
Like tantrikas, yes. Mm-hmm.
Tangra, right? So, Tangra was a monotheistic god. And again, let's discuss the etymology, right? So, in Bulgarian, when I say tam means over there,
Mm-hmm.
there, right? So, I'm here and I'm pointing my finger at something
Mm-hmm.
and say tam.
Yeah.
That's the expansion. That's the first movement, expansion from me
From here to the
to us,
mm-hmm.
right? Expansion, right? Grabvam means similar in English, grab, right?
Yeah.
Bring it back. So I'm expanding my consciousness, and then I'm remembering by bringing back whatever I expanded into back into myself. So it's two movements, expansion and remembering. It's not contraction because I already expanded. I kind of contracted by expanding and becoming from consciousness. I became an individual who forgot that their consciousness, right? But then bringing back is that internalization, is that remembering. And Tantra in Sanskrit it's exactly the same. Tan means expansion, and graha means object, right? Etymologically, so basically has the exact same meaning, right?
But Tantra also means an application of of um, um, a process, because in Hungarian, I also studied Hungarian and through the relationship of Sanskrit and Hungarian, and ton is a Hungarian word for a teaching.
Fascinating. Perfect. Yes. So again, layers of meaning, right?
Tantra in itself is a practical application of embodiment, like of the embodiment teaching of consciousness.
Exactly. I'm expanding and I'm remembering. That's the application.
Okay.
Right? Teaching.
Okay. Okay. Can I ask you of a deeper layer? Because because we're not just philosophizing about etymology. I want to bring everything down to embodiment. So
yes,
whenever, and I'm asking for your experience, existential embodiment, whenever, let's say, I get into this state and it happens fast, is I do go back to the kind of like the ur emanation. I go back to the point of emanation where everything is kind of contracted back into it and then comes out of it. And it's like a pulsation, moment to moment, from being to nothingness, being to nothingness. And that pulsation is then just, the witness is a bad word, but is there, present, the pulsation, just like the breath is in and out and in and out.
Yes. And again, this is correct, but I think it's important to use as much as we can the best word to describe this. And contraction is not,
okay,
I think, the best word to describe it.
Yeah.
It's more like drawing yourself in. Just going within, right? And the right word will come up as we talk, but it's not contraction. It's falling into your own being, into your deepest being.
it's shown to me that even when the Sushumna, you know, in the
Mhm.
Trisul, the Sushumna, the central channel, when it starts to pull in, yes, it's exactly that. You know, the breathless breath, when the
Yes.
Sushumna starts to bring all of the senses in, and then you completely get almost like ejected into this like no place, no time consciousness place.
Yes, so I recently published my first book called Sacred Repose, Abiding in Bliss and Freedom by Acharya Shambhu. That's my spiritual name. And in collaboration with this amazing Sanskritist, Ben Williams. And yesterday, people asked me to do a workshop on the book. And we started yesterday, the workshop, each Saturday for 2-3 hours for 12 weeks. And we have 40 people in the workshop and great discussions already. We have a
Amazing.
WhatsApp group and we have great discussions.
So one more
And
time, it is a 10-week course or 12-week
it's
course?
12 week. Yeah,
12-week
originally it was
course.
going to be 10 weeks, but I expanded it 12 to 12 weeks.
Amazing. Amazing.
That's that's what ended up happening. Blossomed into 10 week. Well, I should say this. My analytical mind thought, oh, 10 weeks, I'm going to cover all these things and to convey the deepest secrets of sacred repose. But when I started working on the outline, the goddess said, no, it has to be 12 weeks.
Yeah.
She's the boss, right? So the very first practice we did on the workshop yesterday was the simple breathing practice of just watching the breath, what you might call simple breath awareness. And in my experience, the simpler the practice, the better. Because the simpler it is, there's less intellectualizing, less thinking, less engaging the mind, trying to, oh, I'm going to do this complicated pranayama. I'm going to count to 17 and then to 55 and this and that. You can drive yourself crazy just with the technique.
And the technique actually reinforces body awareness constantly.
Yes.
That's my problem.
Yes. So with this practice, you just follow your breath.
Okay.
And you notice the simplest thing, this inhalation, there's a pause, exhalation, and there's a pause. And yesterday, as the first hour of the workshop, we streamed live from Ganeshpuri, India. Ganeshpuri was where one of the great Indian saints of India in the 20th century used to live, Bhagavan Nityananda, who happens to be my Sadguru, the root guru of my lineage. Shivaratri means the night of Shiva, where you meditate at the night, you do your mantras, and you celebrate that universal consciousness, which is the source of everything. And it's a celebration specifically of the union of Shiva and Shakti, the union of consciousness and the power of that consciousness, that expression of consciousness that created this amazing universe for us to play in and rediscover its source. And Swami Lakshmanju, who used to live in Srinagar, Kashmir, the last direct descendant of the non-dual Shaivite and Shakta practices that flourished between the 8th and the 13th century until the Muslims invaded northern India and kind of pretty much killed that tradition. It went underground and it ended up spreading in a different flavor in southern India. It's a whole different conversation. There was a very heart-opening text called Shiva Stotravali by Utpaladeva, one of the founding fathers of this tradition. Shiva Stotravali means hymns of praise to Shiva. And it's all devotional expression of the longing of the individual soul for its source. And it's incredibly beautiful, verse after verse. You read it and you crying and you're just melting. It's incredibly beautiful. And one of the verses describes the internal meaning, the inner meaning of Shivaratri, that night of Shiva, that sacred night of Shiva. And every night should be a sacred night of Shiva, of course.
Every moment, yes.
Every moment that that internal experience of Shivaratri, that union of Shiva and Shakti, is when three things happen. Inhalation stops, exhalation stops, and thoughts stop. So you have cessation of basically breathing and thinking. So if you think of, you can think of it as the world of duality of me and somebody else happens within the breath. I'm inhaling, I'm exhaling. That's the container by design that creates duality. And when that stops, the body doesn't fall away. When that stops, thinking automatically stops. And then you fall into that ground of being, if you will. That's our true nature. So now we don't need to be yogis to isolate ourselves in a cave for decades and doing austere practices to have this realization. And it's so profoundly simple. So what we do is we say, okay, I become aware of my breath. I'm inhaling. And I make contact with my awareness of the pulse at the end of the inhale, however momentarily. It's kind of like striking a match. You know, you're creating a spark by consciously infusing your awareness in the breath and paying particular attention to the pauses of the breath. In each breath cycle, there's two pauses.
Yes.
And in those two pauses, however momentarily, there's no inhalation, there's no exhalation, there's no distinction between the two, and there's no thought. That's pure luminous awareness that we can make contact with twice in each breath cycle. And you do this over and over again. And when you do that, there's no thought. The gross breath remains, but then you fall within the gross breath where there's called the single breath. The breath that, and you begin to discover that energy that's creating the gross breath, that's behind the gross breath. There are yogis, chapter 6 of the Tantra Loka that I mentioned earlier, it's all about breath, mastering breath. And we breathe 21,600 times a day. There are yogis who are so masterful with their breath, they take one gross breath a day, one breath in 24 hours, and they still have a physical body.
Okay,
right?
well, let's do this because I've looked into this for so long. Let's say we talk to people beginning this pathless path, you know, intermediate and maybe more seasoned practitioners. What would you say to this when automatically you drop in? So you were called to immerse yourself into silence and not really doing so much, doing all the practices, the austerities. Yes, that was needed to a certain degree, but now immerse yourself into silence. So when I, let's say, immerse myself on a daily basis into silence, there is this natural pull. It's a very adamant, very powerful pull in. You're pulled in. It's almost my breath is fully suspended, and this still remnant gesture of my brain trying to follow, you know, the rhythm of I need the breath is brings me back into this bodily form. But there is a retraction of breath, and I could stop for minutes my breath, and it is not an I that stops it, it is that process of not breathing. It is naturally happening.
Yes. So maybe I think let's talk about the layers of the central channel. So what you're describing is being drawn in, and you have a tangible sense of getting closer and closer to into your spine. right? Literally, all your energy
Yes.
gets sucked into the spine
Yes.
or the center of the body. Different traditions talk about the spine or basically the central line of the body.
Yes.
And there's different variations, but
Yes.
and for each of us might have a different experience. Entering the spine or entering some sort of like a column of light, however you
A
experience
pranic
it.
channel,
But
yes.
no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. However, God wants to reveal that experience to you, it's gonna be your own personal experience.
Yeah.
That's very important to realize. There's no wrong answer. So this is huge pranams bowing down to my teacher in the physical body, Swami Kecharanatha Nataji, who lives on Maui now, of really explaining that there it's not one central channel. Yes, it is one, but there are layers within that central channel.
Okay.
So I think that's going to help a lot of the listeners. The outer layer of the central channel runs from the base of the spine to the eyebrow center. That's called Sushumna.
Yeah.
And the experience of the Sushumna is of a flow of energy, right? It's that flow that's enlivening the gross breath, that's enlivening the body. So it flows from the eyebrow center to the base and then rises from the base to the eyebrow center. So it goes,
Prana, apana.
yes,
Exactly.
right.
So,
But prana at an energy level, not gross breath.
mhm.
It's the source of the gross breath. You can think of that flow as the source of the gross breath, right? And there's a tangible sense of flow. And in your practice, what you do is, if you don't feel it, that's okay. You can feel the base and the eyebrow center talking to each other, and that opening, or any breath or visualization meditation will bring you to that place. And then you can visualize that flow. And when you start thinking, when you start like your attention gets caught up in the sound or a sight or whatever, while you're meditating with eyes open, eyes closed, you bring all energies without exception into that flow. Let that flow unify all the energies. Let that flow unify the multitude of Shaktis, the way the one Shakti expresses itself, the one energy expresses herself as multitude of Shaktis. So use that flow to unify as a unifying agent, if you will, as the glue, to bring all of the energies in, mind, emotions, all of it.
Mhm.
Don't leave anything, right?
Experiences, all of it. Mhm.
And as that process matures, and that bringing of energies into that flow matures, that reveals the second layer of the central channel, which runs from the base to the center of the head. And that's called Vajranadi. And in this channel, it's a more subtle experience. There's no flow anymore, but it's movement of energy up and down. And there's a practice where you can bring your awareness from the center of the head into the base where Kundalini resides, and you can kind of pull up energy from the base into the center of the head, and kind of reestablish that connection. And that's where the center of the head, you can think of it as individuality. You feel yourself as an individual expression of the light of consciousness. And here, by establishing yourself in the center of the head and in that channel, Vajranadi, Nadi means channel.
Yes. And Vajra?
Vajra, yes.
And what is Vajra? Do you remember? I
I
forgot.
don't know that emoji. I have not had a chance to look into that emoji yet. That's a whole different project. Sushumna, Vajra, and the other two, right? So as you begin to get established in that, and in that channel, I'm a big fan of Star Wars, and the lightsabers they fight with, it's like this buzzing energy, right? That's what the channel feels like. It's just like this,
Exactly.
and there's some movement up and down, right? And it's very contained, right? The flow, there's like, if you will, expansion and bring it back in. Here, there's no flow.
Yes. It's
You
like
just,
lightning standing still.
yes, you're just resonating,
Yes.
right? Which is an experience that automatically happens to you, by the way, when you go to the megaliths in Bulgaria. But Bulgaria is a whole different conversation. So as that experience of being established in that resonance from the base to the center of the head matures, that reveals Chitrini Nadi, which runs from the base to the crown. And Chitrini Nadi, there's no sense of flow anymore. There's no sense of energy moving up and down. It's just one streak of light, very slightly resonating. It's so subtle. It's beyond individuality. And the way I think of it is, think of it as the potentiality of Shakti. Shakti before she becomes anything.
Preeminence, exactly.
It's pure potentiality, right? And it's so subtle. I can feel it right now. And it's just so liberating. I just want to shut up and just remain there, right? Then as you abide in that channel more and more from the crown to the base, Chitrini Nadi, that reveals the innermost channel, which runs from the base to what's called upper Dvadashanta. Dvadashanta means end of 12, or about three fifths above the head, or 12 finger widths in the tantric tradition. That's called Brahmanadi. My teacher calls it the divine thread, where it's pure connection between you and universality. It's, if you think, a thread of pure awareness that does not touch the body. It does not touch the mind. It does not touch the emotions, which you can wrap into the mind. Does not touch the chakras. There's no chakra anymore. There's no energy centers. Does not touch the Sushumna. Does not touch the Vajranadi. Does not touch the Chitrini Nadi. It's pure, direct connection. And you know who you truly are in that channel, right? So it's that maturation of our inner practice, however we do it, whether we're doing Ramana Maharshi, who am I? Whether we're doing Advaita, whether we're doing Tantra, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's a universal experience. And it's interesting because Ramana Maharshi, he was doing this self-inquiry, but yet he had a very detailed understanding of Kundalini, right? So whether you do Kundalini and you arrive at awareness, or you do awareness and you go for a Kundalini process, it's so enmeshed. You can't separate it, right? But whatever draws you in, it's part of the play of consciousness. I'm drawn to this practice, you're drawn to that practice. Wonderful. Yeah. We can still be friends and celebrate life and be together, and it's amazing, right? I just
love also a different readiness of attainment, because you've touched on Raman, and I wanted to ask you this, and thank you so much for the demonstration of this, the layering of the Sushumna, because it is the layering, the depth, just like you can also go into the diamond heart and it has many layers. And talking about the heart, by the way, it is scary how we are started to resonate all over the globe. You just mentioned the lightsaber. So I teach children, and I call this exercise the lightsaber spine, and they love it. Isn't this interesting?
I know that, but that's a one metaphor, one way my brain.
Mine too.
Explain it, yes.
My son laughed, I think, for an hour when I just explored this meditation with him, and he's like, "Mom, you don't even know what's a lightsaber." I just heard about it. So, Ramana, of course, he always talked about not going into the scriptures and really just having the direct method. By the way, the who am I method, you can't just do that as a beginner. That is like a very advanced method if you truly want it to work. But let's leave that aside. So Ramanan, and have you heard about Amrita Nadi?
Oh gosh, someone else brought about Amrita Nadi.
So let me ask you this.
Talk about Amrita Nadi. Let me talk about who am I. Okay. So it kind of circles back to the beginning of the conversation, etymology, and using our own language. I'm discovering more and more that in my meditation practice, using my native language, that the language I was born with, is way better than thinking in English. or trying to explain something in English, a second or third or fourth language I might have. I speak Spanish and all of that. Go back. My recommendation to practitioners is wherever you were born from, use your own native born with language, because there's a reason for that.
Yes.
The whole different conversation we choose where to be born and all of that, and this karma associated with that place and language and all of that, right? So and that became clear to me when I was in Bulgaria in the megaliths. Instead of asking myself who am I, and I occasionally do Raman's practice, I don't even ask who am I, but the message I got as I was meditating in one of the megaliths in Bulgaria, and by the way, tens of thousands of megaliths in Bulgaria, it's truly incredible, was just saying awesome. I'm inhaling
Awesome.
awesome, which means I am in Bulgarian. Asmi in Sanskrit, right? Awesome. That has such much deeper resonance than saying I am in English, or even aham, right, in Sanskrit. So I'm just using more and more the Bulgarian language in my inner work, and it just draws me deeper. Than I use Sanskrit all the time, but English I'm completely just done with in my spiritual practice. I use Sanskrit, and Bulgarian draws me the deepest. Just saying awesome, or even saying svoboda, freedom, svoboda, right? It just draws me deep, deep, deep inside. So going back to your question about Amrita Nadi, I know what I know. And here's what I know and what I've experienced. And that's in alignment with Swami Lakshmanju. Interestingly enough, I'm just spending time this week on Kauai with Christopher Wallis, who's one of the more well-known now tantric scholars and practitioners. He
I
wrote a
met
book,
him.
Illuminated Recognition Sutras, and now he has the latest book is Near Enemies of the Truth. So I've been lucky, him and his wife stayed with us for a few days here, and we actually just yesterday we had a great conversation about variety of spiritual topics. And we were talking about there's a manuscript by Swami Lakshmanju called Kundalini Vijnana Rahasyam, which means the secret knowledge of Kundalini. And it's amazing. There's partial translation available. Hopefully, we'll soon have a word-by-word complete translation. Swami Lakshmanju and my immediate teacher, Swami Kecharanatha, are my sources of understanding of Kundalini, how Kundalini works. And Swami Lakshmanju, just because you can track his lineage all the way back to those masters from the 8th century, I am inclined to think and drawn to his explanation of Kundalini. And he talks about that there's a twofold movement where there's lower and upper Kundalini.
Yes.
And I'll share my screen in a second. It's something that will blow your mind away.
Do I have to make you a host or something?
Let me just try to find it on my computer first. Let me try to find the image. And that's an image that I only discovered recently, just like maybe a week ago, and was posted on Facebook by someone. So let me try to share my screen.
I think you can.
You have to make me a co-host.
Just a second.
And that visual would help with your
I
question.
can only make you a host, but okay. Yes.
That's okay. It doesn't matter. It's still recording.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Okay, now I can. So this is so beautiful. So this is a 4th century BC golden necklace that's put around not the necklace, sorry. It's a neck ornament. It's put around the neck and kind of goes over your chest. It's pure gold. Bulgaria, by the way, has the oldest gold treasure in the world, and there's a bunch of treasures, golden treasures in Bulgaria. And this one is not the oldest, but it's one of many. So the image to the right, let me zoom in. And again, it's that inner impulse, like the energy telling me, zoom into this thing, check it out. There's something going on here. So again, this is 4 BC, 4th century BC. That's 1200 years before like non-dual Shaivite and Shakta practices got codified.
Where do you see the downward moving?
So just 1 second. So what you're seeing is two spirals, right? And then as the two spirals meet, there's a drop of nectar, if you will.
Mm.
So one interpretation of these images, you can think of it as Shiva and Shakti combined produce the nectar of bliss, right? Which is the source of creation. You can interpret this as Shiva, Shakti, and the individual, the Holy Trinity. And what I noticed there's another drop at the bottom. So where they made, there's a drop, and at the bottom there's another drop. So you can interpret this as the lower and upper Kundalini. The two drops would represent, respectively, the lower drop would be lower Kundalini, asleep at the base of the spine, and then you have the upper Kundalini, which is here above the head. That's the pure universal Kundalini, and it's the merger of the two, bringing the two of them together, that leads to liberation. And the way, that's my understanding, the way Swami Lakshmanju describes it, there's a downward movement to the base of the spine. So this first movement is down, and then it's up. It's as if the upper Kundalini goes on a date with the lower Kundalini, just drops down, right? Oh, hello, how are you? You know, I've missed you. I haven't seen you in a long time. So the upper Kundalini drops down. They meet, they embrace each other, and they rise together again, right? I'm just using a simple, funny, trying to be funny a little bit, right? Metaphor, right? So there's falling into the base, the two meet. You can think of the upper Kundalini as the universal Kundalini, and the lower Kundalini is the individualized hologramic version of the universal Kundalini. And they create this like play of separation, right? And then there's lowering, catching of the lower Kundalini, merging, and rising together for the chakras, right? And what's interesting, Esther, is notice the beautiful lines that they're pointing up.
Yeah.
Right? And can you count how many of them are? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Now you tell me, is this a coincidence?
And as it's going through the chakras, it's like a new level of attainment.
Yes, it's piercing the chakras, right? So it's the rising of, again, triangle, right? It's in the shape of a triangle. It's that triangle rising.
But can it have something to do with the magnetic force and the electric force kind of coinciding and actually forming this type of an implosion? It's actually an implosion.
Well, the way it's described in some places is, and the way Lakshmanju describes it, as it starts rising, it begins to spin the chakras at very high speed.
Yes.
And what happens is, as you begin to speed up the chakras and they turn clockwise at very high speed, just watch, as a kid, we had these things that you turn.
Spinners, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So when a spinner, when you pick up a spinner, it's solid, it's form. When you spin it, it begins to disappear. As it's spinning so fast, it begins to disappear.
That's the implosion. And then it creates. Yes, it's actually described in physics, this attitude of antimatter, and it creates antimatter through a very high oscillation of scalar waves. It's very
yes. So it kind of like, that's the word. Remember in the new conversation we were talking about collapsing and all of that drawing in. I think one good word to describe this process, and it just came, is folding back in.
Onto itself.
Onto itself. Exactly.
Beautiful. And very fast, because people would be saying, well, how can I get there? And I want to spin it in a very interesting manner. because I know what you're doing. And I think this is very pertinent that you are now visiting these sacred sites in Bulgaria, and you have been ordered by the mother, which the cedars and the cedar intelligence is here, and we're downloading these ancient technologies for sure. And so why is there a need to visit these sacred sites? Now, all of these sacred sites are ancient technologies.
Yes. Oh my
And
gosh.
and why I'm actually bringing this, because now we're actually having this access to scalar technologies, like Etheric Studios has a scalar wave machine that really puts you into a 0 point right away. But these sacred sites do this organically, without any electricity, with cosmic electricity. And so tell us why is it important? What would be the purpose of now humanity realigning with these sacred technologies for the rehabilitation of humankind, actually?
Before I talk about this, I would like just to like wrap up the discussion about the embodiment part of it.
Okay.
So you can intellectually understand this upper lower kundalini chakra starts spinning, they collapse into like a center, and they start collapsing into each other until there's no chakras
And
anymore.
there's no chakras. That's very important. Unified chakra field. Yeah.
Yes. So, but all of this, Esther, is intellectual knowledge.
Yes.
So what? Right. So the way I think about it is really simple. When I lie on my deathbed, when I'm about to shed the body,
Mhm.
which is inevitable, and I have all this intellectual knowledge. I figured out that there have been UFOs here. I understand all the quantum physics. I understand that the Great Pyramid was a power station. All of this stuff. Is God gonna say, "Oh my gosh, Shambhu, oh man, you figured me out. You're going to paradise right away. All this knowledge you've accumulated. Oh man, I just bow to you. You got it. You're going to paradise." I don't think so, right? So my encouragement to the listeners is keep it really simple. Be aware of your breath. I'm inhaling. I'm really exploring my awareness, the pause of the inhale, at the end of the inhale. I rest there. I rest my awareness there. I'm exhaling. I'm feeling the next pause. At the end of the exhale, I rest my awareness there. Let that simple practice unfold your awareness. Focus on that way more than accumulating knowledge, in the ordinary sense of knowledge. Let that, and understand that, and I talk about in my book, that scripture specifically says, tantric scripture understands that breath is the first unfoldment of consciousness. If that statement is true, which it is, in my experience and the experience of a lot of people, that means everything is contained in the breath. Time, space, perception, all the secrets are contained in the breath. And as the breath unfolds from inhalation, exhalation, I talk about in the book, I talk about the 5 breaths. That awareness of the inhalation, exhalation becomes the single breath. The single breath is the unifying field. Then the single breath becomes the upward rising breath, fire, which burns all duality, and that becomes the all-pervasive breath, which is consciousness. And then there's pranana, which is the breathless breath, which is the source of the breath within consciousness itself. That's all you need to do. Everything else is entertainment.
Yeah.
That's, if there's one gift I can leave the listeners with, would be that message.
But is there a complete cessation, like directly a complete cessation of breathing?
the gross breath continues, but you established in the breathless breath. And then as the body sheds, and we're gonna get a chance to talk about my near-death experience, but that's a whole different 1 hour. As the body sheds, you remain in that breathless breath. You're not going anywhere. You're just folding yourself back into the light where you came from as the body falls away.
But some yogis have established themselves in the breathless breath, literally.
Yeah, so when the physical they shed the physical body, they're not going anywhere. They're already
But they
there.
don't have to shed it, because then there is an internal kundalini breath that's happening.
Well, that's a whole different conversation. We can live hundreds of years, and there's techniques to do that and all of that. But that's
Exactly.
right. So to answer your last question about the Amrita Nadi that goes from the heart to the head,
It goes kind of like above the head, like the
and curls and
yes,
people.
it's like a cobra curls out, and it's not an energy.
I have not experienced it. I don't understand it. There's some traditions that talk about it.
The
What
heart
I've
on the right, you haven't?
experienced, Esther, is that as the energy I talked about earlier about the Vajra Nadi that runs from the base to the center of the head, as you begin to experience that and you begin to pull energy from the base into the center of the head, and you begin to nourish the crown, this center, there's more accumulation of energy. As that energy kind of like begins to soften and like falls back into awareness, I've had the experience several times where it's kind of like honey trickling down from the crown into the center of the head. It's like drops of honey just like trickling down. And my teacher describes the same experience. Amrita, it's Amrita, but not Amrita Nadi.
I understand.
Right?
It's Amrit. It's different.
Right. Nectar. Actually, one of my students from the UK, she sent me a message a couple months ago. She had the same experience, right? But again, it's an experience. Again, when I'm dying, is God gonna say, oh,
It's not
Shambhu,
about experience.
you feel this like drop of honey in your center of the head? Oh man, you're just so cool. I just love it. You're going to paradise. No, it's about awareness, expanding our sense of awareness. It comes down to Saznание, consciousness of Bulgarian, which means with knowledge. And what is that knowledge? That state of awareness where I'm expanding from my limited sense of I to the sense of everything.
And that's what the Amrita Nadi does. It's not, but it's okay. It's not your
I don't know,
that
if
catapulted me.
I've experienced the version of it, which is just Amrit, just the dropping in. But I'll leave it to the experts like the statue of Ramana Maharshi to explain this. I'm not there yet.
I mean, maybe these are just different techniques reaching to the same place. And Amrita Nadi has nothing to do with Kundalini whatsoever, which is very important. Nothing to do with energy either.
Well, I disagree.
Because
So
it's a Nadi.
there's Shakti Kundalini,
Okay.
which is Para Kundalini, the Supreme Kundalini, which is one with awareness, and everything else falls from her, right? So it just comes down to language, right? So in that framework, at least in my tradition, and then you have the middling Kundalini, Para Kundalini, and then you have Apara, the lower Kundalini, which is basically also Prana Kundalini, the source of the breath, right? So you get into this, like, again, it's all intellectual knowledge and it's confusing. Just comes down to just breathe, just be conscious of the breath. Everything else will reveal itself.
And do you feel that, let's say you have your students and you have a certain level of attainment, that when they are practicing in that space, then your embodiment of consciousness is actually helping them to build their own stamina to abide?
The best way to describe it is, and I think that my teacher said it beautifully, that a teacher is like a tuning fork. So to help you begin to resonate with that, whatever the attainment of the teacher is, the same attainment in you. It's not attainment, it's already in you.
Yes.
Just a tuning fork. And at this 3D dimension, in this low vibration of flesh and rotting flesh and earth and all the elements, right? We all need teachers, so most people do, until you don't need a teacher.
Very quickly, would you talk about these sacred sites and why they're important?
Yes, so let me share my screen again.
By the way, while you're doing this, Jesus, as a teacher who also went to India and he learned there for a long time, he actually used the sacred sites as well, all over India. But we don't have to go to India. We can go to Serbia or Bulgaria for that.
Absolutely. I joke that I discovered India in Bulgaria.
Yeah, that is true because
Traveling to Oslo, I have a sensitive stomach and I cannot last more than 2-3 weeks in India. I have to get out of there. So I'm happy that I discovered India in Bulgaria.
Mhm.
So on the upper left corner here, you see, this is on my website, thelightoftheheart.com. Very easy to remember. I discovered the megaliths last summer, literally 9 months ago. And I had no idea that the megaliths in Bulgaria. I had discovered the womb caves in Bulgaria the summer before in 2022, but I didn't know about the megaliths. So this is sunrise at this amazing megalith that's so powerful. And that's the megalith that just told me, as some. I am.
Mhm.
I am practicing Bulgarian. I'm breathing in from the space above the head to the base, as, base to crown and above, some. Simple. Um, and just being there, it annihilates you. You just by being there and just getting still, you don't need to meditate. It happens automatically. Whatever process the ancients embedded in those particular all these sacred sites, they're alive and well, right? So the picture in the middle, this was in July last year. You see the upward pointing triangle of light. This is at sunrise, meeting the downward pointing triangle. This is a cave that clearly was designed by people, and that's it, sitting on top of a massive megalith. So you had to climb up and find your way there. And the energy got me there. Nobody showed me this, so I go to these places, and I'm being shown these places. Half of the time by people, half of the time by the energy. So, and it was amazing. I was meditating in this cave, and that triangle happened, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" They embedded the meeting of the downward pointing triangle and the upward pointing triangle, which represent upper and lower Kundalini, which we talked about. And that was the actual experience meditating there. On the picture on the upper right, you see me just, I don't like many pictures of me, and I'm just like very uncomfortable being on video in general anyway, but here, just for contrast, you can see how big that particular megalith is. And that megalith is sitting on a layer of crystals. And you just sit next to it, and this is like a cosmic antenna. It's so alive. It's like a living being, and it's vibrating, and it immediately draws you into the spine. You don't do anything. You just close your eyes, you just breathe, and the megalith would draw you automatically into the spine. Then here on this row, this is at sunrise, one of the arches, and this particular arch in the middle is connected with a layer of crystals. And that particular megalith, my experience there is the merger of Shiva and Shakti, the merger of feminine and masculine. Just incredible. You're just blown away. And the picture in the middle here, that's the other side of the arch. So you can kind of like see here, like the layer of crystal in the middle. Another megalith here. This is at sunset. Here I'm sitting on top of the arch at sunset. The one here in the middle is the one interpretation. This is the tomb of Orpheus, speaking of spiritual technology. This particular site has what the mainstream archaeologists, they put a label on this one. It says, oh, this is a well. Actually, it's not a well, but it's a womb carved into the stone in two parts. And it's just incredible how they did it. Thousands of years ago, possibly tens of thousands of years ago, maybe even older. And you go inside that container, if you will, And my experience there, that it was an ascension container where at the same time I was drawing in energy from the navel into the base of the spine, like from Mother Earth. And I think it was also an anti-aging device, and just like re-nourishing the body, resetting your DNA.
Can you
And
show where, like, can you, you're actually
here,
sitting where? You can't, oh, there, in there. Uh-huh.
no, it's not there, but this is at the same site.
Okay.
But I don't have a picture of it, right? But just because you mentioned spiritual technology, right?
Yeah, that's what
Uh,
we are talking about. And is there like a cave-like space in there?
yes,
Yes.
yes.
And it produces a lot of negative ions. That's why. Wow.
I,
Maybe
do-
that's
I would describe it as produces a lot of heart.
heart.
Yes, right. Then the picture on the right here, you see this is the Great Womb Cave in Bulgaria, which is quite a hike to get there. And you can see the entrance of the cave looks like a key, right? Which is the key to your own heart. And then looks like a pregnant woman.
Like a keyhole and a pregnant woman. Okay.
And the acoustics in that cave are unbelievable. When I was there, the second time I was there on my own, I started hiking up into the dark. And I got there with the first rays of sunlight. After crying for an hour, just the goddess just working deeply. At some point, the cave told me, "Get up and start chanting." And I did, and I found, kind of like, I was walking around, and I found it's about 60-foot long cave. Just incredible. Just being there. You don't need to do anything. It works you. Esther, at some point, she told me, "Get up and start chanting." And I found, like, I played with the acoustics inside the cave, and I found a place where the acoustics are the best. And I started chanting. And then that chanting woke up, if you will, the resonance of the cave, which was basically the sound of creation penetrating, because it was mostly water. That resonance penetrates through the body, and just incredibly healing. Having your own sound reverberate through the cave, get amplified, get more purified, and the sound of your own voice healing you.
Yes.
You're talking about mantra earlier, right? There are just so many reasons to go to these places. And in Bulgaria, there are hundreds of womb caves, there are thousands of megaliths. It's truly mind blowing. I mean, I still can't process completely what happened. So here at the bottom, you see some other womb caves. The picture on the left, you see these carvings up in the rocks
Mm-hmm.
that mainstream science, mainstream archaeology, they don't know what the heck they're about. They have all kinds of stupid speculations. One of the sides, one of the rocks had collapsed. Usually the ancients carved these niches up high into the rocks. How they did that, I don't know. And each of them is slightly different. I think the best interpretation I've arrived at so far, and that's great, one of the guides that I was able to meet in Bulgaria, is that it's mantra, it's harmonics. It's the particular mantra, the harmonic of that particular site that the priest would chant to awaken that site. So the pilgrims there can become charged with that energy. And that's very interesting because Orpheus, who lived anywhere between 1000 2000 BC, way before Jesus and Buddha in Bulgaria, and is known as the flute player, the famous flute player, Orpheus thought that, and he lived in that region in Bulgaria, the Rhodope Mountains, which are truly magical. Everybody who goes there, even non-spiritual people, which my Bulgarian, my immediate Bulgarian families, they love going there because it just feels good to be there. They cannot explain why, but it just feels good to be there. And that's Orpheus. So Orpheus thought that there's only one God, that each of us is a divine spark of that one light, of that one God. And he taught 4 ways to discover that our divinity. One of them was music, I am mantra, the right. So I believe these are harmonics. So that rock that had fallen down and there were like 6 or 7 niches in that particular rock that had collapsed. Literally, I stuck my head into them one at a time, and I started chanting Om. And each one had a different harmonic. Each one had a different resonance, and it felt so good to do it. Right. So here at the bottom, you see couple more womb caves, and there are single womb caves, the double womb caves, and the triple womb caves. It's amazing. And then that's one more of the megaliths. And I have a couple of videos here on my website, so people can check them out.
And you're also organizing a retreat this summer, and
Hopefully.
hopefully.
Now I'm focused on the Sacred Repose workshop, which ends in end of May.
Yes.
And I've been unemployed for 9 months now, so it really depends on my job if and when I find a job, right? So part of me hopes that I
Maybe
don't
this
find
is new job.
into the emergency Bulgaria. We'll see. It will up on my website if and when I decide to do emergency in Bulgaria. And just to give people some sense, so it's gonna be 5 days at the megaliths and staying at a hot spring resort, soaking up in the hot springs, which is amazing. Bulgaria is famous for the hot springs, and Bulgaria has hot springs for any possible physical condition you can think: kidneys, liver, blood system, nervous system. The hot springs have different chemical compositions that help with different ailments.
Yes.
And then 5 days at the megaliths, so at the womb caves. So I'm thinking about 10-day immersions, maybe one or maybe a few if there's interest this summer, July, August, September, and maybe one in October. We'll see.
Amazing. And so it's very important that we remember how to use these sites, and through connecting your innate consciousness, you're just remembering how to be one with all.
So it's very interesting because that sitting on the beach here a couple of years ago, and this inner voice telling me, go to Bulgaria because that's where it all started.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning not for me, not for Bulgarians, but because there's so much ancient technology that's way before the pyramids, way before anything in India. Right. By the way, I discovered in Bulgaria a Shiva lingam.
Yeah.
Carved in the rock externally, right? So just and it's it was in perfect shape, right, in the granite rock. So we don't know really how old these things are. Then the pyramids in Bulgaria, right? That there's only a few people that are beginning to go there and just feel into them, and nobody's even started excavating or done some work, archaeological work at the pyramids in Bulgaria. It's truly unbelievable.
So I have a feeling after I watched your video on the presentation of the sacred sites, is that, I mean, the Serbia and the mountains in Serbia, they're also very close to Bulgaria. That must have been that cedar cradle where the first seeding of this planet may have happened. I mean, some theories are saying it's Africa. It does, well, let's suppose it's that. And we have the same occurrence in Serbia as well. And then the Serbs are now coming up with these theories that it could be, you know, they are the most drevna kultura, the ancient cultures, which I would be very interested in further looking into. I think we should, just to see that they're more ancient than the
screen again, right? So we can speculate. Every country can try claim. Serbia can claim that the most nations. The Greek can claim the most nations, right? And the answer is probably all of those, right? So this is a DNA study.
It's a cradle, so.
All right. So it's or if it's not the first cradle, it's one of the main cradles,
One of the
right?
main cradles.
So and DNA does not lie.
Mm-hmm.
A Greek historian, a Roman historian would tell, or they would have written down whatever the agenda of their bosses are, right? But DNA does not lie. So this is a DNA study looking at the R1A1 genus that's passed from father to son, and doesn't change very much. And using that DNA in time and space, you can find where the original father was, right? So here they're showing you the original father is in the Balkans, right? Which is southern Romania, Bulgaria, maybe a little bit of Serbia, and maybe a little bit of northern Greece, which used to be Bulgarian, by the way.
Yes.
Then they first started spreading into Europe, and then they went east. So this particular paper, and this is very interesting, this is a Russian scientist. Russia is an empire, right? So he could have said, oh, it started from Moscow, but he didn't say that, right? Because DNA doesn't lie. So it just shows you that the original father was there. And I'll be really curious if he incorporates Africa in this DNA study to see whether maybe indeed it started from Africa and then it went into the Balkans, then started spreading, or maybe from the Balkans there was also another arrow going into Africa, right? But you can see here it went into the Middle East, the downward pointing arrow, right? So if this was the origin, maybe from there they jumped into Africa, right? That's another possible interpretation. So I think DNA studies ultimately that's the real history, right? Otherwise, reading the historical accounts of whoever, there's always an agenda. Anytime you have a human, there's always an agenda.
Yes. Well, what interests me much more, and we're finishing, about is the origin of this Vedic, not just philosophy, but the Vedic sciences of embodiment were drawing me since I was a very young girl. And there are some theories, as you mentioned in your video, that all of that actually started from the Balkans.
Yes.
And there are Sanskrit inscriptions in Serbian cemeteries, symbols. So, and then we don't have too much time, but the Bogumils are very much connected to the lineage of Babaji. And that is the very kind of long stretch what I'm proposing here. What did you
That's a whole different conversation.
Exactly. Yes. So one more time, Shambhu wrote a book. It's called Sacred Repose. I love your title. I love this word repose because it's automatically dropping you into your heart. So sacred repose, abiding in bliss and freedom. And he's having an ongoing workshop right now. You're meeting every Saturday. And thank you so much for allotting this time to me. And we've learned so much. It was a very beautiful view on your embodied experience of Kundalini through your teachers. Thank you so much, Shambhu. I'm much obliged.
You're welcome. Many blessings, everybody. Oceans of aloha from Kauai, and blessings from Mother Bulgaria, blessings from Mother India, blessings from the Universal Mother.
Much love to you. I'm just gonna stop this.